Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a pretty intense piece of ancient writing.
That's right. We're looking at Ezekiel chapter 14.
And well, it doesn't hold back, does it? We're going to be wrestling with some big themes here.
Definitely. Things like, internal struggles, divine judgment.
Mm-hmm.
It gets heavy.
And maybe even a kind of hard-won understanding at the end. Our goal is really to unpack the core messages here.
Yeah, the insights and, frankly, some pretty stark warnings within this chapter. It moves fast.
Okay, so let's dive right in. The scene opens, and you've got these elders coming to Ezekiel, leaders of the community.
Right. You might expect them to be seeking, I don't know, guidance. A good word.
But almost immediately, the text gives us God's take on them. And it's not about how they look or what they say right then.
No, it cuts deeper. It says they've set up idols in their hearts.
And put wicked stumbling blocks before their faces. That's quite an accusation.
It really is. And that phrase, idols in their hearts, that's key, isn't it?
How so? What does that shift signal?
Well, it tells you right away, this isn't just about physical statues, though. Sure, that was an ongoing issue. This is internal.
Ah, okay. Like where their real loyalty is.
Exactly. What's truly captured their trust, their devotion, the text says, it's not God.
And the stumbling blocks, what are those?
Things they're pursuing or maybe things they won't let go of, obstacles they've basically put in their own path, keeping them from righteousness.
So it's this combination, the inner loyalty misplaced and the outer actions, these stumbling blocks reinforcing it.
Right. And the text presents this as incredibly serious. It shows their true heart, regardless of them, showing up to see the prophet.
So they come looking for an answer, maybe, but God sees this internal reality first and the response they get. It's described as God answering them himself, but in keeping with his great idolatry.
Yeah, that phrasing is striking. It's almost confrontational. It doesn't sound like the comforting answer they might have wanted.
Doesn't sound like it at all. What does that mean, answered? In keeping with their idolatry.
It suggests the answer itself will reflect their inner state, not necessarily addressing their surface question, but mirroring back the depth of their misplaced loyalty.
Wow. So, the answer is part of the judgment, almost.
It seems that way. It's a response tailored to the heart, not the words. Imagine seeking advice and getting a mirror held up to your hidden issues instead. Intense.
And the text gives a reason for this approach. It says the purpose is to recapture the hearts of the people of Israel.
Who have all deserted me for their idols. That word all really hits hard.
It does. It frames it not just as a few people straying, but as a massive turning away.
A systemic problem, yeah.
Right.
Rooted in all those individual idols of the heart becoming like the norm.
Which then leads to the call to action for the whole house of Israel.
Which is?
Repent, turn from your idols, and renounce all your detestable practices. It's unambiguous.
Absolutely a total turnaround, internal shift, external change. No half measures.
Dismantle the inner idols. Get rid of the outer stumbling blocks. It's about integrity.
That's a good way to put it. Alignment between the inside and the outside.
And interestingly, this isn't just for the Israelites born into the community.
Right. The text widens the scope. It says that it applies also to any alien living in Israel who does the same thing, separates themselves, sets up those internal idols.
So it's about being part of that community, that covenant, and the standard applies. Doesn't matter where you came from originally.
Exactly. If you're living among them, you're held to that standard of loyalty. Shared community, shared consequences.
And the consequence for the individual who persists, who comes with those heart idols, it's severe.
Very. The text says, God will set my face against that man.
That sounds personal. Direct opposition.
And make him an example and a byword.
Meaning?
Like a public lesson, a warning to others, and then cutting him off from the people.
A complete separation.
Yeah. And the stated result of all this, then you will know that I am the Lord.
Not just knowing intellectually, but experiencing that power.
Experiencing the reality of who is sovereign, yeah. Through seeing this judgment unfold.
Okay, now we get to a part that's, it's really tough and much debated.
You mean about the prophet?
Yes. The text says if a prophet is enticed to utter a prophecy to someone who comes with these idols.
It says God have enticed that prophet.
And that prophet will be destroyed. That's hard to grasp. It sounds like God is setting the prophet up to fail.
It's deeply challenging. One way people have tried to understand it within the text's logic is that it's part of the judgment dynamic itself.
How so?
The inquirer's idolatry is so deep, it kind of corrupts the whole interaction. Even the prophetic process gets caught up in it, leading to a false message, and the prophet facing consequences too.
So the prophet isn't blameless.
No, the text immediately follows up. They will bear their guilt. The prophet will be as guilty as the one who consults him.
Ah, okay. So shared guilt. The prophet becomes complicit somehow by speaking into that corrupted situation.
Whether willingly or maybe deceived themselves, but the text describes it as divine enticement linked to the inquirer's state. It highlights the danger for everyone involved when there's that deep internal conflict.
So it adds this layer about the responsibility involved in speaking or claiming to speak for God.
Definitely. And after laying all this out, the judgment, the shared guilt, the text states the ultimate goal.
Right, the desired outcome.
Then the people of Israel will no longer stray from me, nor will they defile themselves anymore with all their sins. They will be my people, and I will be their God.
Declares the sovereign Lord. So the harshness is framed as aiming for purification, restoration.
That seems to be the idea presented, a severe path, but towards reestablishing that core relationship, cleansing the community.
That provides a bit of a wider perspective, at least on the why behind these difficult passages. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The chapter moves from these individual and prophetic interactions to the fate of a whole country.
Yeah, a nation that sins by being unfaithful, the scope broadens significantly.
And unfaithful seems to tie back to that pervasive, misplaced loyalty we talked about earlier.
It does. It's the collective version of the idols of the heart.
And the text lists these four. It calls them dreadful judgments, specific consequences for national unfaithfulness.
Right. Famine first cutting off the food supply. Kills people, kills animals, total disruption.
Then wild beasts, making the land desolate, dangerous, even childless, it says.
Yeah, uninhabitable. Then the sword, warfare, violence passing through the land, killing people and animals again.
And finally, plague. Disease, bloodshed, pouring out wrath, killing people and animals.
These four together, they represent complete devastation, hitting sustenance, safety, population, health, everything.
Total ruin. And to hammer home just how severe these specific judgments are, the text uses this example.
The example of Noah, Daniel, and Job.
Exactly. It says, even if these three men were in it, why these three?
Well, in the traditions this text draws on, they're basically the gold standard for individual righteousness, right?
Okay. Noah survived the flood. Daniel, known for integrity in exile. Job, the epitome of faithfulness through suffering.
Right. So the text picks the absolute best examples of personal piety it can.
And here's the point that's so striking and maybe difficult. It says, even these men
could save only themselves by their righteousness.
Right. And it repeats it. They could not save their own sons or daughters in this situation.
That's the shocker for many people. It seems to cut against maybe other ideas about righteousness protecting family or community.
So what's the specific point being made here, according to the text?
It seems to be about the overwhelming nature of these specific national judgments triggered by pervasive corporate unfaithfulness.
Okay.
In that context, the text argues individual righteousness, however great, only saves the individual from the physical destruction sweeping the land.
It doesn't shield their family or the community.
Not from this kind of widespread judgment, according to Ezekiel 14. Their personal righteousness saves them, but it doesn't override the consequence falling on the collective.
So it's not saying their righteousness is pointless.
No, it preserves them, but it highlights the sheer scale of the disaster when national sin reaches this point. The collective consequence is immense.
That really emphasizes a kind of corporate responsibility, or at least corporate consequence, in a way that's quite stark.
It does. It makes the judgment feel incredibly unavoidable for everyone in the land once it's triggered on this scale.
Then, the chapter brings this principle right home. It applies it directly to Jerusalem.
Yes, the city Ezekiel is focused on throughout his prophecies.
The text says, God will send all four, sword, famine, wild beasts, plague against Jerusalem, to kill people and animals.
Confirming that, in the view presented here, Jerusalem has reached that level of unfaithfulness. The general principle now becomes specific and devastating.
But then, right after declaring this total judgment, there's a slight twist.
The mention of survivors.
Exactly. Some survivors, sons and daughters, who will be brought out of it.
So even in this picture of utter ruin, there's a remnant, a group that makes it through.
And the text gives them a specific role, or maybe explains the effect they have. It says they'll come to the exiles, basically.
And when you see their conduct and their actions, you will be consoled regarding the disaster I have brought upon Jerusalem.
Consolation. How does seeing survivors of such horror bring consolation? That seems counterintuitive.
It's a really complex idea here. The consolation isn't like, oh good, it wasn't so bad after all.
Right, the disaster clearly happened.
Instead, the text links seeing them, their state, maybe how they've been changed, their conduct after the judgment to understanding
what?
understanding why it happened. The text says, seeing them, you will know that I have done nothing in it without cause.
So the consolation comes from grasping the justice or the reason behind the severity.
That seems to be it. The survivors, in their condition and behavior, somehow become living proof that the judgment, however harsh, wasn't random or arbitrary.
It wasn't without cause. Seeing them confirms the divine purpose described in the text.
Exactly. It's a difficult kind of comfort, not relief from pain, but a grim understanding, a validation of the divine action within this narrative.
Wow, that connects suffering, survival, and understanding in a really profound, if somber way.
It certainly does. It forces you to think about finding meaning or justice even in the midst of catastrophe.
Okay, so let's try to pull these threads together. We've seen the focus on internal idolatry, those idols of the heart, and how serious the text treats them.
Leading to severe consequences for individuals and even entangling prophets.
Then the shift to national unfaithfulness, triggering those 4 dreadful judgments.
And that really challenging point about Noah, Daniel, and Job, their righteousness saving only themselves in that specific context.
Underscoring the limits of individual merit against overwhelming corporate consequence, as described here.
And finally, landing on this idea of survivors from Jerusalem whose presence and conduct somehow bring consolation.
A consolation rooted in understanding the cause, the divine justice behind the disaster.
It's a chapter that really pushes you to think about the hidden versus the seen, individual versus collective, and how we understand judgment and its aftermath.
It definitely raises questions for reflection, like what's the real difference between just going through religious motions and that internal state the text is so concerned about?
Yeah, and how does this idea of inescapable national judgment sit with our modern focus on individual responsibility? It's jarring.
And this idea of finding consolation and understanding the cause behind destruction. What does that even mean for us? How do you process catastrophe that way?
These aren't easy questions with simple answers. The text forces the engagement.
It really does. And maybe that's the final thought to leave you with, drawn from the text itself. This idea that even after terrible judgment, witnessing the survivors their state, their actions could reveal a purpose.
That the devastation wasn't pointless within its own framework.
Right. Consider what it means to find understanding, maybe even that difficult consolation, in seeing the aftermath and concluding, as the text suggests, that it happened for a reason, that it wasn't without cause.
A complex and challenging place to end.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Ezekiel chapter 14. Plenty to mull over.